Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and as always, please do like, subscribe, and share. Make some comments. Those are invaluable, and they work for everyone, so please do so. And by all means, stop by planetarycitizens.net and pick up a copy of my latest book. It's called Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart and Humanity. And I know you'll love it. It's getting some great reviews on Amazon, so get your free copy. And if you have an opportunity, please offer a review as well. So this week's guest is Matt Hampton. Now, Matt's got a really interesting life in his tech world and explorations, and gosh, he connects cool tech and cool people, and he's been doing so for almost 3 decades now. He is founder and CEO of multiple organizations, Envoy Design, Solutions Architect. He's a founder of Head Shop. He's a chief technology officer at Lightwriter. He's a chief technology officer at marked.arc and Game for Good as well. And so he's also a new business director for Studio LLC. So I know this is going to be an interesting jaunt into the life of Matt Hampton, and we'll be right back. So don't go away. Do you ever feel like you're in your 40 days and nights in the desert? Well, many do. There's too much frustration, pain, and suffering in the world today. And I help people through that to find joy and happiness in their lives, to create action plans, and find a way to achieve their goals. I've done that with many. If my reputation online is anything like I show up in person, you've got a great score here. So Matt, it's just so great to have you here. I know we've been dancing around each other for a while on LinkedIn. I really love what you've been doing and the fact that you're continuing to do so. So thanks for being with us, and I'm looking forward to sharing this great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as we're doing a little prelim, and our objective with these conversations are to illustrate how we are bereft of having the inner conversations and bringing those out to where we can share and find some navigable truths in that we can share and build upon in life. And most of us really withhold that from others because sometimes our experiences and our lives are kind of weird, or we think they are, and we don't want to share those because we think that other people might think we're a bit weird or different, and shy away from us accordingly. Now, how did you find your first inkling that, there's this merging of an inner and outer world for yourself? Was it, did it happen as a child, or did it advance and kind of build upon itself throughout your life?
That's an interesting question. And one I hadn't asked before talking to you, because to me, I guess the right way to say this is there's always been a layer that I couldn't put my finger on between me and the things I saw. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's just like this. I don't know the best way to put it, but like, remember obviously the famous Matrix movie, right? With the blue pill, red pill scene,
Sure,
right? Yeah.
sure.
I do remember very distinctly seeing that movie for the first time and just having this sort of like blissful epiphany, like aha moment where I'm like, that's what I'm missing. Like there's a blue pill out there, or a red pill out there rather, that I just don't know where it's at. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. Obviously, this movie, I can't jump into there, but that's where like I
Sure.
wanted so desperately somebody to just hand me the red pill.
Right.
And And like, obviously this whole red pill, blue pill thing has become the subject of internet memes and all kinds of other stuff. So clearly, I'm not the only one out there that had this sort of latch onto this. But even I don't know how long ago that movie came out. It's been a minute now, but ever since then, I've just sort of used that as sort of a barometer of saying like, well, you know what, like there is something else out there. I
Hmm.
don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. And just like Neo in that movie, it's like, there was just this thing eating away at me that I
Sure.
just,
Yeah, and
like
it's from the inside too,
it's all
right?
from
It's
it's
this.
only from the inside. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
nothing externally guiding that. Right. Yeah, I met people. I mean, look, I have two art degrees, went to art school. So all that lifestyle, and that kind of personality that draws into art school environments and that kind of creative
Hmm.
petri dish, if you will. Like I have a
Well,
pretty open mind.
and it comes from an inspired place within you too.
Yeah.
That artists, musicians, all of these arts and culture, that we've diminished over the years because we're trying to meet state standards in school now,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
and it's not really giving our youth the opportunity to become self-critical, self-examining, let alone socialize in ways that are um, beneficial
Sure.
to each other.
Well, I think when I was going through this, like for myself, like where I was going with that, I think was, I have a pretty open mind. So when somebody says I can see your aura or something like this, right? I'm like, okay. And believe it, sometimes don't believe it other times, but overall, I'm willing to listen, right? Like
Right,
I'm not,
right.
I might judge you intensely as soon as we're no longer in company, but like I'm not,
That's
I'm,
an honest comment.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
really honest, and yet, in that judgment, I do too,
sure,
right?
we all do.
And yet, there's this next layer of curiosity. Well, what if, what do they see? What might it mean to them? If they're seeing a part of me that I can't see, what might I learn from their perspective or reflection of that that could benefit me? Well, we have to be open and somewhat transparent, right? Because nothing's hidden to those who can see.
Sure.
And yet we're often it's like, oh, that's too much for me, right? And I don't want to know, and they're all wacky and weird, um, and I think this is human nature. We do this because we
Sure.
have enough direct experience of that other aspect of life to really understand and be able to navigate it with efficacy.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that sort of I've always, first of all, around the judgment thing, I think it's funny because people are like, oh, I don't judge. I'm like, okay, so then you're a liar. Like that's incorrect. Like, I mean, everybody judges, right? Like you don't, and to sort of like, if you're not lying to me on purpose, you're lying to yourself by accident, right? And I don't
Sure.
really understand how people can do that because like if I'm doing something stupid, right, I might fight you on it because I don't want to be called out on my bullshit, but I definitely know I'm doing something stupid, right? Like, I mean, there's
Yeah, yeah,
no
yeah,
question
yeah,
mark, right? I'm not like,
yeah.
you know, but like, when somebody says to me, hey, I see auras and I like your aura today, you could take this a couple ways, right? And most people will be like, this person's crazy, right? And that's a very common reaction. Th-
Absolutely.
then there's the other reaction, which is, oh my God, I love it. I wish I could see it. And they're like gushing and like overflowing with like,
Yeah, that's the
stuff.
other end of the
Yeah,
spectrum,
that's the
right?
other end of the spectrum. And I'm sort of like always, I've called myself the 50-yard line kid for as long as I can remember because almost everything I do, I try to take this like middle of the field sort of way of thinking about
Hmm.
it. Like this person says they can see auras. So they see something that they are interpreting as an aura, which is either one of two things. They're either lying to get attention, which we have to just assume that that's not a universal thing, right?
Sure.
Or they're seeing you and I think we agree on what orange is, right? Just take a more benign thing, right?
Hmm.
We say that's orange. We could point to something that's orange, right? Like this cup that I have in front of me. Like this, we might agree is orange, but if my father, who's colorblind, might not agree that that's orange. But even
Sure.
he, whatever he does see, he knows that this is what other people call orange. So even though he doesn't necessarily see it because he understands that it is not what he sees because of his color blindness, he
Right.
can still say this, whether green, purple, whatever he's actually
Well,
seeing.
now that's where self-examination comes in, and
Correct.
the peeling back of the layers of who we are, what we know about ourselves, how we are. And we often go through life without those kinds of questions of others. How do you see me? What do you sense from me? Am I feeling like I'm authentic? Am I trustworthy? Am I able to fit this notion that you have so that we can have an intelligent conversation without going to either end of those spectrums and just get real and raw and just explore, right? How
Right.
often are we able to do that with any kind of relative ease?
And I think that's one of those things that sort of, going back to the aura thing, right? Like if your first example was somebody saying, I see auras, and you had that experience and you left that conversation with whatever you
Hmm.
left with, right? The next time somebody says, oh, I can speak to spirits, right? So now this is sort of an evolution of things, right? It's like another thing that's potentially untrue, potentially misinterpreted, potentially, right?
Right, right.
But in my view, it sort of it opens the metaphorical door just a little bit more than it was open before, right? So if you are of the mindset that I happen to be of, and you say, okay, I don't need to believe this person. I can, in fact, think they're batshit crazy, but I'm going to listen. And to your earlier point, let me peel back what it is they are seeing. How do I interpret what they're seeing? Because maybe not all of what they're saying is bullshit. Maybe there's like a piece of it that's sort of a little bit over the
Sure.
edge,
Or
but
maybe they don't understand
or maybe they don't
what's
understand.
going on inside of them, yet
Correct.
there's this compelling prompt from within them to share this. And having your background, mine as well, we're aware of the various layers of reality that are present, like you were talking about the perception and perspective that your dad had with the color blindness, right? That's a different layer that others don't have that he has to learn how to integrate. Well, from a perspective of consciousness in the consciousness studies and quantum physics now and these kinds of things that looking at the electromagnetic spectrum and the various layers that is has and the frequencies within each, there's also some theories of everything that says, we're as humans, we're able to access 9 other dimensions.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then there's another experiential process that was with what was it, Edward Close and Vernon Neppy presented this theory of everything paper called the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm.
Wow. Say that 5 times
That was,
fast.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
TDDVP is what they're abbreviating for. Then there's another, now that was in 2010 that they published it. Back in the 50s, there was a guy named William Swigard that developed a process called multi-plane awareness that was actually a facilitated process where you have a facilitator and an experiencer, and the experiencer is taken through 9 planes of consciousness and in order to integrate their body on each of those planes and then be able to see out through it, learn what they can in that brief time, and then bring it back. So these kinds of corollary,
Sure.
data packs, if you will, one experiential, one purely theory, and yet the two are really saying the same kind of thing. So if we've got that ability, how do we interpret that as human beings when we're open to this nonlinear, non-local space that few understand, let alone can be able to articulate, right? As to
Sure.
where this information is coming from, why it's there, the prompting that began it to begin with, and maybe it's as simple as just the desire to love and be loved and to be in that space. How does
So
that relate in your discovery process?
So it's funny. A couple years ago, we started a podcast, which was just supposed to be for fun in
Mhm.
COVID. It's turned into, I think we just, you and I are going to actually have a different conversation on that show, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that's
Looking forward to it.
episode like 150 something now, right? And The interesting part about that is that blue pill, red pill sort of angst that I felt back in the day, right,
Hmm.
has found an outlet through this medium because I get to talk to people about all kinds of weird stuff, right? Like, and it's
Sure.
great. But here's where it starts to get like I find myself having to keep going up levels to see wider in order to understand something I had just seen, right?
Well,
And an
that's the
example,
process, right?
right? You just have to keep going up, keep
Yeah.
ascending until you can see the edges, right? And one of those great examples is like, again, not to beat this aura thing to death, but when you follow that line
Well, there's a
for
certain amount of consistency that needs to be followed through,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Good
but follow
examples and
that for
taken to different
25.
levels.
Yeah, totally. But follow that for 30 years, right? I have these conversations for 30 years. So I have 30 years of one step further. That door keeps opening for 30 years, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, right?
I can relate.
Yeah. Now, most recently had breakfast with some kind of esoteric friends not so long ago, and we got into a very interesting conversation about soul families and the Akashic records and how, like this whole idea of accessing this sort of universal intelligence, if you will, or universal spirituality, if you said a
Right.
different way, but
Right.
but and that you just keep going back into it, right? Like, so you just keep
Sure.
going back into the matrix, right? Like, so it's not, your wife, your friends, your family, your kids, whoever, your neighbor, your janitor, like whoever. These are people that you probably in this line of thinking are interacting with at a more, cosmic level, right? Like you're not
Sure.
this,
Well, your discussions are different as proof of that,
correct, right? But here's the funny part though, is
potentially.
like, yeah, here's the funny part though. Like, I think that is equally possible that that's all complete horseshit. Like, right? Like, so it's complete, and that's where it gets interesting because now let's talk about Venn diagrams for a second, right? If you Venn diagram a soul family or the concept of the Akashic
Hmm.
records with a quantum computer that I'm fairly, versed in nowadays because of the quantum computer company, you'll notice that like that entropy that comes out of a quantum computer is cosmic in scale, right? It is not anything that we know of on this planet, right? I can have a quantum computer dish out a number quadrillions of like digits long and it'll never
Right.
repeat,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, it's literally
Well,
pulling
was it
from,
one that just recently they did a computation that would have
yeah,
taken
that was Google
decades
Willow.
and,
No, 4 septillion years.
yeah.
Yeah, the universe is only like
Now,
14
here's
billion.
the interesting thing to it, and speaking of computers, that there's a term that's used in quantum computing, the recursive function,
Right?
right? So, what's your understanding of that?
um well, this isn't really like about the science of a quantum computer, and I think that's kind of diving more into that. I think what I'm
Well, I think
trying.
it's reflective of both. The reason I'm asking this question is because, recursive function is the system that queries itself for problem
Yeah,
solving.
yeah, yeah. Well,
That's
but
essentially what it means.
that's the
What are
technical
we?
thing.
What are
Oh, I
we?
see where you're going with this. Okay.
Right?
Sorry,
So there's
I
that.
didn't see where you're going yet.
Okay. So I hope I opened that door a little bit further because
Well,
the same way you have just validated that you're constantly going back in, you're dissolving into self. You're going, okay, this could be bullshit. It could be true. Don't know. Let's figure it out. Right? Find some way to query that restore, maybe not restores or restores the connection, right? Because the Vedas, right, 15,000 years ago said, paraphrased, we're all divine threads incarnate, connected to source, capable of God consciousness. Well, what's that mean?
yeah, well, I mean, again, so now here's this Venn diagram that I was talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
now what you're talking about right there, could we call that an Akashic download? Probably. Like, like, I mean,
All kinds of terms,
could we
depending on
call it,
who's
yeah,
experiencing and reflecting.
correct. Could we call it a connection to our soul family? Probably. I mean, we can call this anything we've talked about already but here's the point, I guess, and this is why I was drawing a differentiation between the physical, reality of a recursive function, which explains the mechanism of action by which the computer will come to a conclusion,
Right.
or, versus that it's possible even at all, right? Like, so I get what I took out of the Google Willow thing, right? 4 septillion years, is obviously a ridiculous amount of time, right? um, Several hundred orders, thousand orders of magnitude over the time the universe has been in existence, right? Like, I mean,
Hmm.
it's
Supposedly.
supposedly whatever. Yeah. Again, another one of those
Again,
things
can you
like, yeah,
believe it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Right. Right. But here's what I did, which by the way, you want to talk and get, yeah, I mean, we can get real weird about this some other time, but that same math formula technically also proves that multiple dimensions exist. So the
Mhm.
multiverse actually has a mathematical foundation now through that experiment,
Well, right.
which
And
is,
Stephen brought that out with M theory some time ago.
so here's the difference though. Like and here's where we're going, right? It all kind of loops back on each other, right?
But
When
that's
you
the recursive
have
function, right?
Correct, right. Well, yes, I guess you're right. But if a guy says, "Hey, I got this idea," right? And here's the idea. It's one thing, and then that person might be able to get a bunch of people on board with believing it. Like they might even start a religion around it. Cults have been started on less. You know what I mean? Like, but there's a whole different thing when we actually have a computer that comes out with a math formula that supports that. Right now, we've taken that to a completely different level of reality. Right now, it's gone from like, well, I got this kind of batty idea that might be right, but it
Yeah.
sounds good, and I'm a real orator, so I'm going to be able to say it in an articulate, convincing way, and maybe I get a bunch of people to follow me around and whatnot. But math is a different thing altogether, right? Because math now gives us a foundation to say, oh, well,
I don't
shit,
need to follow. I
I don't
just
need to fill out. I just have to
listen to the
look
math,
down. Yeah, I
right?
just here's the math.
Right.
And I hate to reduce everything to that, but I was a Catholic school person K through 12, and my running joke, which I did not invent, but I think is funny nonetheless, is if 18 years of Catholic school won't beat Catholicism out of you, nothing will, right? Like it's, you know, um,
I
and
forget you.
and I'm not shitting on Catholics. What I am saying though is my experience in that construct was not favorable, not because I was like molested by a priest or anything
No, well,
nefarious like that, but it just
and
didn't
if I
make sense.
may, I think that with that, I totally get it. I grew up with a bunch of Catholic kids. We had a Catholic school in town as well as the regular middle school, and then we all came together in high school. What I've found, probably similar to you, is that these systems are set up for dominance and control of populations as opposed to the enlightenment of it.
Correct.
Um, and they're all pretty much this way, except those who remained independent and just said, hey, you might want to take a look at this.
Yeah,
Right.
but that wasn't wildly popular in the 80s when I was in Catholic school, right? Like, I mean, it was
It's
basically
not been
like,
widely popular for millennia. It's
yeah, well,
just
I mean,
we're getting to
obviously,
the
yeah,
point
yeah.
where
I
we're
guess
starting
that,
to question things, right?
but so when I looked at that, I said, you know what? This is interesting that no one's paying attention to. It would seem the more I learn in school, the more I could draw a line that says religion has always explained stuff we can't explain. And as we can explain more, the purview of religion shrinks. And that's not my opinion. That's just you could look back. I mean, at one point in our history, recorded history, by the way, this which
Mhm.
means, not that long ago,
Right.
we blamed eclipses on angry gods. We blamed drought on angry gods. Like we must have done something wrong. Grab all the firstborn males and let's slaughter them on this pyramid because that'll make our crops grow. Like this isn't hyperbole. This happened, right? Like this
Right.
is right. So when you look at the world through that sort of lens, you say, okay, and maybe it's because of where I was born, but I say to myself, I'm like, how at any point could this ever have made sense to any human who's
Sure.
thinking at all?
And yet the very one in particular, the Bible says, seek the mysteries of God. Well, what,
Yeah,
this
what
is
does
what
that mean?
we're doing,
Right?
right? We're trying to explain, we're trying to understand. Now we're looking at, okay, the 666, what used to be the sign of the devil. Now we're understanding it's carbon atom, and it's really the number of man, because
Right.
that's what we
Right.
all are,
But see,
right? So,
that's another one of
so
those things like,
science and spirit,
right.
science and religion, right, have to begin to say the same thing. Otherwise, none are truly valid, right? They just give us more questions and a deeper dive into the potential of reality as we experience it.
And I think that the bigger problem that when you, if you're going to ever try to marry science and religion in any way, shape, or form, right, there
Mhm.
isn't really a common denominator there because if, well, first of all, if there were, how many
I
millions of
would offer
people?
there is, and it's the recursive function. It's the constant inquiry of what's inside of us, the same way that computers do,
But
right?
that sits outside of a traditional religious construct. So I'm not
Well,
saying, yeah, yeah,
yes and no, because even in those religious concepts, we're taught to go into the closet and pray, right? So
right,
what
but that's
happens
not
in the
problem
closet?
solving. That's yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like that's not problem solving unless look, you know what it is? And again, this is where I have to put the asterisk on everything I'm saying here. There's no
Sure.
such thing as always or never, right? So I don't,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, and I think that
Absolutely, there's no.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. The only thing absolute is that there's no absolute, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, there's always an exception to the rule, right?
And
And
we're always evolving to greater understanding of the intricacies of how energy manifests itself in and through us.
sure. Well, here's where I was going with the asterisk comment, right?
Hmm.
When I was a kid going to confession, you'd go into confessional and you'd say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 6 months, 5 years since whatever it is since my
Right.
last confession." This almost invariably ends with say five Hail Marys and Our Father, and we're going to call it a day, right? And when you're a kid, especially a kid in Catholic school, prayer is essentially a checklist item. It's a function, right? You
Sure.
actually you sit down, you usually are kneeling, you got your hands in some kind of position, and you're just reciting words, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't know a single kid, nor was I one of these kids, who actually understood the gravitas of those words or the deeper meaning of them or inspected them in any way. They
Mhm.
simply were memorizing this stuff and repeating it back at on command. And to your earlier point, religion by and large, all of them were not meant to enlighten. They were meant to unenlighten or prevent from enlightening because if the masses knew what the elite knew,
Right.
it'd be a very
You
different
know,
story.
and the ties would no longer support the land acquisitions,
Right. So
right?
here's where it gets weird though. If you talk to a monk, prayer is a very different thing altogether. Now we're talking
Absolutely.
about
Yeah.
inward meditation. We're talking about trying to touch the cosmos. You're talking about an actually a much different version of prayer.
Well, here's a perfect example. As a kid, I was orphaned at birth, adopted early. And at 4.5, my parents brought my adopted sister home. I didn't know anything about being adopted to that point. I had totally loved, was not, I felt like these were my parents, right?
Sure.
Didn't know any better. So I had been attending Sunday school because they were churchgoers, United Methodists. Mom sang in a choir. Dad sometimes did too. Um, and yet, after they told me, because they felt like, okay, it's time because they just brought my sister home. There was no pregnancy involved. It was just she
Right, right.
shows up,
Just
right?
magically, here you are. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
stork did
exactly.
not drop her off.
And so I had no real, yeah, I had the question, okay, well, why? Who are my biologicals? I didn't put it in that terms, but who are my real mother and father? And, maybe someday I'll know. What I did have as a resident or resolute question after that was, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them?
Mm,
Right? I really put that to the test. And I didn't realize how innocent, naive, and deep that was until, I don't know, a few weeks, a month later. I'm standing on the landing of our stairway. I'm got my elbows in the windowsill, chin on my
yeah, you're
hands,
doing
looking
the
out
thing.
through the window, and all of a sudden I hear, and this was in the evening, mom was watching TV. I could hear the TV. All of a sudden, I hear this deep male voice say simply, "Hey, you." And it was so deep, so resounding, so through and through me that rather than engage it, I spun around and I asked my mother if she could hear it. And of course, she said, nope, couldn't hear it, my voice. And she, no, I must have been a peeping Tom. Well, I realized at that point that it wasn't, right? It was deep. That voice came in me, right? It wasn't something I heard.
Sure.
So what do you do with that, right? As a kid, do you develop that? Do you ignore it? Do you, just sit with it for a while? What I did was dad worked nights, mom would be in the kitchen, so I'd be in the living room with the lights on and the curtains open. I'd look out the living room window and out into the darkness, right? Because you can't see out. And I would project that voice out, hoping for a return. And it was, I don't know, maybe another 3 weeks, a month, something like that. I finally found a place where I shut up, right? Because as a kid, your mind just it's
Yeah, yeah.
constantly going. Even as adults, right? We don't shut up. We don't just pause and be quiet. So in that pausing and being quiet for a moment, the voice returned. And so I learned early how to still myself, query, and listen. And that alone has set me apart throughout my life because most people can't do that. And they
Yeah.
see it as, like you, the asterisk, right? More often than not, there's disbelief. So
Yeah.
how do we navigate that? Because it's obvious if it's true for me, and there's all kinds of literature and things of others who have similar types of things. If that's as real as it is, then how does this allow us to bridge that science and religion, or science and spirituality world, because of our ability to test and confirm collectively, right? This is part of why we're talking right now, to bringing those inner conversations out and having a compare, contrast, reflect. Um, let's see where the similarities are, see where the differences are, what we can agree on, what still is questionable, and what questions we might ask to find more compatibility or corroboration.
So it's been my experience that when you ask that question, what you often find are versions of this story. I
Mhm.
want freedom of religion for my kids, and you get up on a soapbox and you're fighting like hell for freedom of religion, and then somebody says, great, we're going to put a satanic church in there because that's a religion, it's recognized internationally, and that's valid. And they say, whoa, 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 no, 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 that's crazy. My religion is totally normal, but Satanism is
Right, right,
fucking
right,
nuts, right?
right.
And I'm using sort of a third rail type of comparison to just to point out the sort of thing that I think most people end up finding themselves in, where they're like, my thing is normal and my thing is valid,
Hmm.
and here's a couple other things that I think are not so valid, even though
Right.
to a dispassionate third party they are identical, right? Like, so when you ask that question, and many others like it, I think what I think our biggest problem is that we find ourselves at that inflection point very quickly most of the time. At least I do, and like I told you, I have a lot of these weird conversations. I know you do as well, so maybe you have the same experience. But there's a lot of people that are like, oh well, I can hear this inner voice, just to pick on you for a second, right? Because
Sure.
I've done all this work to find out what's happening and how to deal with it. But your aura looking thing, that sounds a little nuts. Like, so you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and to a third party person, I'm like, well, is it? Because you know what else that voice could be? Schizophrenia. Like, there's a bunch of things it could be.
Okay, okay, so here's another reflection, another layer, and I don't mind it,
And I'm not picking on
being
you at all.
vulnerable.
I'm just using your
No, but
example. Yeah.
people, for me, I had that experience, right? When at first I had an awakening in college that I talked my parents about. They took me to the psychiatrist. After 3 visits, he said, "You're not crazy. You've had a spiritual awakening.
Right.
My advice is don't talk to people about it." Well, the following year, I got still in college. Um, I did some crazy, stupid shit and ended up at a frat house, got beat up, ended up in the ER, and my
Oof.
parents decided to commit me. And so that psychiatrist same story, I'm trying to talk to him to try and discover what's going on in me. I got labeled manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic and put on 2,000 micrograms of Thorazine.
Oof.
Rather than having an intelligent conversation to explore, I got diagnosed from a book, right, labeled and
Yeah.
drugged. Well, how effective is that truly? It didn't
Well, if you,
change my experience, still hasn't, right? I had to figure out, okay, I got to lie to these guys so that I can get out of here.
sure.
I got to keep my
Yeah.
mouth shut. I was warned, right? And now
Yeah. I
here's,
already have the blueprint for this. Shut the fuck up.
yeah,
Like, yeah,
exactly.
right. Yeah, totally. 100%.
So, having that, I have great empathy for those who have been in my shoes, right?
Yeah, and we have a different version of this conversation in my development company a lot, around
Hmm.
AI, right? And the conversation usually goes something like this. I am I don't know, a lawyer, right? And you are I don't know, copywriter, right? And we're in a conversation, right? And the lawyer will say to the copywriter, oh man, AI must be rough on your industry, right? Because, it could write so much better than people, blah, blah, blah. And the copywriter's like, yeah, I've lost all this work, but that nothing can replace a human, blah, blah. And they go through this whole thing. And then they say, well, you must be scared too, because you're a lawyer. I mean, it's even easier to replace you. And then the lawyer's like, no, no, no. Here's five totally unpacked assumption ways of why the AI is not going to take his job out. And they get into this sort of, and I watch this happen every day,
Sure.
literally every day, right?
Well,
And
it's
it
natural. I mean, people, we want to be, what's the word I want to use? Productive. We want to be of value, right?
sure,
There's
but
certain
that
things that are
book,
intrinsic to us that we think that we can offer that nobody else can.
you ever read that book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck?
No, but it sounds like a great title.
It is an awesome book. First of all, if you have not read it, I would put this at the top of your to read list.
All
It's a
right.
great book. It's a short read, but the gist of it is basically like, there's a point in the book where he's sitting on a cliff over the safety rails. It's a 100-foot drop. He's gonna die if a grain of sand is off, his foot slips, he's off the thing. No, no, lights out. There's no
Right.
chance of, right. And he's just dangling his feet over the side and reflecting on that potential reality. And he's looking around and he's like, I'm past the guardrail, so no one's going to even see me. If I fall down here, I mean, it might be days before I'm found or.
Hmm.
And
If at
guess what?
all.
And guess what? No one's going to care. Nothing's going to happen. The world's not even going to blink. And
It's the
when
old
I,
hand in the bucket, right? You
yeah,
take
when
your
I,
hand out
yeah,
of,
when I read that, I was like, it's funny. This is humanity's biggest misconception, right? And this is why this book touched me in the way it did. We are not special in any way, shape, or form, right? We really aren't. Even really smart people. Albert Einstein, yeah, he did a lot. He was special in the sense that he was, very intelligent. He had some great insights that led to crazy things.
hmm.
But when he died, the world kept going. Like it didn't even stop. Like you know what I mean? Like yeah,
No,
and
no.
his
But
work
it
got
built upon. So here's one thing that seems to be true in that in the natural order of things, there are those who have, I don't want to say special, built-in design, that information that they're to bring forth, right?
sure.
However it is, they're built that way. It comes through them. They give it to society. Society then goes, oh, thank you, or boy, that's fucked up. And right, and builds upon that in the ways that we do over time. So this kind of goes back into that, um, like Urban Maslow says, right? We're all just energy, and we have design. We have what he calls the higher self. And the betas say, that divine thread
Sure.
connected to source. There's still this operational capacity that we have if we're, uh, cancel the if, when we are astute enough to recognize the possibility of it and at least be open to exploring it without too much um, rhetorical bullshit, right?
But that's where I was going with the comment, right? Two
Yeah,
people talking to each other about why they are special in an AI context, and telling the other person that they're, that they are not special and that AI is going to take them over. Those people are locked in a conversation that clearly illustrates one and only one thing, that
right.
they are not thinking
Bifurcation,
about, yeah, they
right?
are
What
not
about the
thinking about,
unity?
they are not thinking about the global context here. They're thinking about a very local context, right? Like
Sure.
and at that, they're not even thinking about it metacognitively correctly, right? Like it's not,
No, it's all
it,
the ego.
yeah, it's ego led, and it also is what I've sort of come to sort of clumsily describe this as, because I still haven't found words for it, but it indicates to me, it's a tip of the hat to me, that you are not in a space that would even want to explore a deeper meaning to your existence here at all, which isn't
Sure.
intrinsically bad. You don't have to do that, but I can't imagine a life without that, because you know
It's so enriching.
it's enriching, and it also gives you a pathway to bring that special thing that you do have to the surface, right? Like if you buy into the fact that everybody has a reason, and I had a coach one time who put it kind of funny actually. He said, at the moment before your father ejaculated into your mother and you chose to take human form, why did you choose to do so? Like that was word for word what the question was. And I was just gobsmacked when I was like, what? What kind of fucked
That's a
up
question
question?
of all questions,
Yeah, I'm
right?
like, what kind of fucked up question is this? But almost immediately, I'm like, well, that's actually like something I hadn't thought about before, right? Because, uh, and to the untrained, I think, or to the unobservant, I think that the depth of that question isn't even immediately accessible, right? Because yes, you understand ejaculation, you understand the correlation to pregnancy, and that part's pretty straightforward. But like to correlate that with a decision to take human form, like that, we don't think of that part at all, right? Like
No.
if you imagine you actively taking authorship and ownership of the idea to come to this plane of existence at all, that could really fuck you up a little bit. But if
Yeah.
you live through that, which and you do the work, what comes out on the other side is an examination of like, you know what, forget about like the specificity of this question. Let's look at this in a blurry, like squint kind of way, right?
Hmm.
Why is this question being asked? Well, it's being asked to say like, why would I be here at all if I had to put my finger on it? And if you don't know that question, or if you haven't asked that question, or worse yet, if you haven't examined it at any point, then every day that you wake up, you're kind of just bumping into walls, right? Like what are you doing? Like there's no guidance, there's no North Star. And some people, and I've had this argument with more people than I can count, but like they say, oh, you know what? My purpose here is to have a kid or have kids and be a provider and blah, 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 blah. Right. And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, that could be one of the things you were put here to do. But like procreation feels like just one of many things, right? Like what are you going to procreate for? How does the simple act of procreation help anything? Like, right? I mean, I can put my penis into 1,000 women and have 1,000 children out there, but that doesn't fulfill anything. Now, if I had 20 children and I taught them all how to be good human beings, now we're talking about a different
Right.
conversation, right? Like,
But you just reminded me of some, there's a series of books that Guy Ballard wrote back in the 20s of his experiences with an ascended master and others. And one of the things that they brought out was uh, an entity, personage, however you want to call it, known as Sanat Kumara, who is supposedly a planetary logos. We won't go into that, just that I want to mention it briefly. Now, in order for him to gain that office, which was part of the universe administration, right, on a planetary scale, he had to incarnate 1,000 times
mm,
simultaneously, and then bring those back into that singular consciousness that he was in order to pick up everything that was necessary in order to be an effective planetary logos, right? So this takes what you're just saying to a whole different level.
Sure.
And yet, is it possible? Perhaps. We don't know yet. And yet, we are at a point now that we've evolved globally, technologically, scientifically, knowledge basedly, that we can begin to ask these questions and have a little more understanding of what the answers might be based on others who've discovered certain things that we've then been able to, however, our life stream has encountered, it has, and it's given us this new layer of potential inquiry and understanding, or at least openness to, right? And yet with this, there's like with the recursive function, right? There's this dissolving into self. Well, what's that mean? Nothingness, right? Like, nobody means shit, right? So
Right.
from that place of nothingness, then as we reemerge with an intent to find purpose, to fulfill in some way, if possible, or not, depending. COVID was, I think that set us up. I mean, you look at the history of civilization and the events that took place in order to get us to question deeper,
Sure.
right? Now we've gotten this global obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration that gave us that opportunity to sit back and go, oh, what the fuck, over? And
Yeah.
can, why am I here? Who am I? What do I believe in? What am I willing to risk in order to prove that belief?
Well, Maslow had it right, I think, like we had to get through the bottom rungs of that triangle prior to getting to the parts where we could actually even ask this question, to your point, right? Like
Sure,
it's like,
sure.
we had to ascend a certain part. But you know how many people asked this question in the 1300s? None. Like nobody.
No, and if they did,
They were
they
burned
were
or
staked,
yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, like right. So I think there is, but that goes back. I mean, now we're dovetailing back, right? And
Mhm.
that's where I think that if you look broad enough, you understand that all of this stuff is connected, right? And I think that you can't look broad enough unless you've been forced to ascend high enough to see that far wide, right?
Right,
And the
which
only
usually
way
happens through some kind of traumatic event in our lives.
it does, or it could be in my case. Now I'm knocking on wood because I'd like to avoid any kind of traumatic event if I could at all avoid it. But for me, it was less about trauma and it was more about just an unrelenting curiosity about
Yeah,
like what's making this human being say this shit. Like, you know what I
sure.
mean? Like,
Well, the
I
radical curiosity of wanting to dig deeper and
right.
find the answers.
And the first time I heard the term soul family, I was like, what the actual fuck does that mean? Right. Like, and
Right.
I just remember being like, oh my God, who is this lunatic? Right. But then when you start looking at it, you're like, okay, well, let's just suspend disbelief for a moment and just assume that that could be true. What else could that?
That's what's key.
Right.
That statement you just made. Suspend your belief for a moment.
Just for a moment, right? And
Yeah.
listen, we talked to a woman on the show, Betty Gardano, who had died. She was a meth-addled prostitute living in Las Vegas, and and
Mm.
and just it was ugly, 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 right? Nothing good could happen. And her parents, you can listen to the show, but and she's got books out, but her parents committed suicide on an intentional opioid uh, overdose and left a note saying take care of each other to her sister and her. It was a really just fucked up story altogether, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: what happened, right? She went into this limbo of life and death in this intransience between these two sort of
Mhm.
existence points, and all this weird shit happened, right? She's like, I'm in this room and somebody said the only thing that matters is universal love. That's why, this person, and she talked to somebody, by the way, um, who had killed a bunch of people and died and had the exact same experience, right? So, and
Mhm.
and if we dug into this, we had the president of the Bob Kopez on the president of the International Near Death Experience organization, and he came on.
IANS.
Huh?
IANS,
I think so.
International
Yeah, there is an
Association for
acronym.
Near-Death
Yeah, yeah, right.
Studies.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
spoke at their annual conference in Denver in
do you know
2010.
Bob then? Kopez? He's from Amsterdam, I think he is. He's
I am familiar with him. I don't know him personally,
Yeah.
no.
Well, he was on the show and he was telling us, he's like, look, if you go around the world, it doesn't matter. People, these super pious people, mass murderers, it doesn't seem to have a bearing on what the experience is, right? And
Mm-mm. No,
and I
because
say,
beyond this planet, like you were just saying, the optimal experience and maybe an answer to why we're here is to simply to love and be loved.
correct.
Right? We've
Right.
gone from that formless consciousness that's only got limited perception or perspectives. Maybe it's a much larger perspective because it is formless. And now we're here figuring out, okay, how do we reflect where we came from with
Sure.
into where we are.
And you know what else those stories all have in common? They all had a conversation with a energetic being that they
Hmm.
cannot describe that said, you have to go back. And they fight it. Like they say, no, fuck that. I'm not going back. This is way better. Like, why would I go back? And the answer seems to be recursively, well, you're not done yet.
Yeah.
And like then that leads you to a question like, well, what does that mean? Right? Like let's suspend disbelief for a second. Let's say this is real. What what does that even mean? You're not done yet. It means, back to the ejaculation comment, is that you had to have had a raison d'etre to be here in the first place. And if you have yet to discover it, if you have yet to acknowledge it or embrace it or research it or whatever,
Hmm.
then you're not quite done. Now, in a lot of these cases, it seems like you would know as well, those people come back and become sort of other people, right? They
They
take on
change.
cause, yeah, they change
There's
fundamentally.
an obvious change in their behavior. And I had uh, similar thing in college. Um, I got to the point where I was just distraught. In between first and second quarter, I was in a pre-med program. Didn't, and I realized "Nah, it's not quite for me. I could do it academically. It just didn't feel like it was
Right.
part of where I need to go. So in that distraught place, I hit my knees and I prayed. And I said, Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. Now, that was an 18-year-old's prayer, right? And so what happened a couple, 3 days later, I think that was a Saturday night, Tuesday afternoon, came back from class, did the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation. It was
Sure.
1975, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Been
No,
in
it
the
makes sense.
auditorium, and we all did it.
Sure.
And yet it shouldn't have had this kind of effect. I'm listening to Journey's first album, and in the middle, in between the vocals and the vamp in the morning day, this voice I've been familiar with since my 5-year-old times, right, asks me by name if I'm willing to die for what I believe in. What do you do with that? So immediately, my first thought was Christ consciousness. That just seemed to be it, right?
Okay.
It felt a little empty. I say felt because that's where I sense things. So I gave that up and I thought, okay, what could be cosmic consciousness? Yes, because it felt full, right?
Sure.
Next thing I know, there's a rocket ship taking off. Neil Sean does a guitar riff, sound like a rocket ship
Yeah.
taking off. I get a tug from my solar plexus. I pop out of body, turn to look at my body laying across my bed, turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get turned around, I'm engulfed by white light. And it has this amazing sensation to it. And so I start analyzing. I felt individuated and yet part of a collective, of a
Well, that's
unity,
interesting.
right? God,
Sure.
if you will, right? My limited understanding of it. And so in that space, I began to analyze and I came up with, okay, it's iridescent, it's high pitched, it's effervescent. And then I realized I was thinking because I wasn't, right? I didn't think that I was thinking. When I became aware, it's like, oh, I'm thinking, I can't be dead. Woohoo! Wow, is there more? And then with that question, there was a movement, slight, but I felt it. And I'm now in an indigo background with points of light surrounding me. I know the points of light are points of consciousness intuitively. Don't know if they're in body or not because I know I'm not, but I have the sense that they are. And then the voice picks back up and basically delivers my mission that I'm supposed to work with these in my lifetime, that things are going to happen, that faith, have faith and trust that everything will be there at its appointed time, just to simply trust and allow. And then I feel this rush and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air, immediately being aware that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. Now, as
Hmm.
an 18-year-old, what do you do with that?
I would chalk it up to just too much weed, but who knows? You like if I was an 18-year-old, that is, you know what I mean?
Oh
Like I
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yet that was, I had this radical
yeah.
curiosity
What
since
did my
finding out
roommate
I
put
was
in that fucking
adopted.
bong hit, man?
How
Jesus
do I
Christ.
fit? Where am I at? What's my purpose, right? Because there
Sure.
was this longing inside of me that was there from the beginning that I didn't realize, right? It was just this compelling natural desire to know truth and to live it,
Sure.
whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think that that's where it gets hard, right? Because like, when you take what Betty was saying on the show, and
Hmm.
you say, how could this man who killed, and I forget, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 12 people or something. He killed more than a couple people, right? It was like he
Right.
was a bad guy. Like, how does this guy who's
On our level, he was a bad guy. On a yet another level, maybe that was in perfect order,
well, and so what
right?
Bob had actually said as well, actually, I think to your point is the thing he was here to do was that so that everybody affected by that could go through the journey they were supposed to go through.
Hmm.
And when you start reframing it like that, the world starts to make a lot less sense because now all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. Are you
Right,
telling
because we're
me?
thinking of from a linear framework. We're not
Well,
considering
I
the
think it's because we're
nonlinear.
all, whether we want to be or not, intrinsically bound to this Judeo-Catholic,
Sure. Well, anytime
morality.
loss of life takes place, we see it as a detriment.
Well, that again, that's intrinsically steeped in this Judeo-Christian sort of like
Right,
moral lattice work that was
right.
handed
Eastern
down to
philosophy
us.
is like, oh, okay, that life's over. Just wait till the next one.
Well, exactly right. So these aren't, but now they don't take murder lightly anywhere that I'm aware of. But so I don't think that's condoned anywhere. But at the same time, you're right. Like
But those are still judgments.
those are still judgments, right? And so, like, when you start to say, okay, well, wait a minute, how about my unpacked assumptions? Well, my unpacked assumptions was that if you kill somebody, fuck off. Like like you're useless. And I think that that's largely probably going to be my vantage point from this for as long as I live, because I
Sure.
just don't think people should be running around killing people indiscriminately. But here's the thing, if you look at it through this
Yeah, yeah, you
philosophical.
have countries that do that.
Yeah, correct. But if you look at this philosophically and only philosophically, and you say, okay, well, what happens if that is true, right? What happens if this person, prior to his father ejaculating in his mother, decided to take human form so that the families of 12 people at some point are going to be set on a path that they need to be on in order to fulfill their
Hmm.
raison d'etre for being
Right.
here,
And
right?
we don't have, speaking to that point, we have very limited, we only see less than 1% of the visual light spectrum
Yeah, well, exactly,
or the
right.
electromagnetic spectrum. So
We
why
joke
are
about
we,
that on the show all the time. We're like, and how did we get stuck with this one? There's so many cooler ones out there. How come this is the only one we can see?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah. And with that, we understand there's more and we can't see it. So how is it so difficult that we can't extrapolate that to the possibility that other things are possible beyond what we think we know?
because we get tied up in this narrative that was usually spoon fed to us by parents, religious
Mhm.
factors, professional factors. Like, I mean,
All with
Daniel.
good intentions,
Sure, but
usually,
I mean, if you
right?
ever read anything by Daniel Kahneman, I mean, which I'm fascinated by this guy. I mean, he won a Nobel Prize for this. It's so groundbreaking. But the 50 something types of human biases, right? Like if you start
Right.
to pull that apart, man, every conversation you've ever had starts to make a lot more sense, right? So, you're like, oh shit. All right, well, that's that.
Yeah,
And
and it just, and as you evidenced, I believe that there's a subtle movement of how you look at things and that perspective shift can eventually be huge because of
sure.
it.
Yeah, somebody years ago introduced me to that Chinese proverb, like good news, bad news, who can say? Like, are you familiar with, yeah, with this? Like where,
Mhm.
yeah, and like one of the I don't need to go through the whole thing, but one of them was basically like, the Chinese army is coming to this village to round up every oldest son to go off to war. And they don't know this, but the oldest son in this case runs out and breaks his leg with a horse type thing. And everyone comes back. They're like, oh my God, that's such bad news. And then, like, the next day they come and they say, every able bodied man has to come. We're in a war. And everybody was basically going to die. And this guy couldn't go because he has a broken leg. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, well, fuck, thank God that happened, because otherwise I'd be going to get staked out in a battlefield
Right,
somewhere.
right. Well,
And
let me ask you a question because we've had a wonderful, lengthy conversation so far. When you ask questions internally, who answers?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's from my perception, it's my voice, but oftentimes it's saying things that I don't know that I would have said. So it is a hard question to answer because, on one side, I could look at it as me allowing space to access a higher, frequency of answers,
Or
right?
like, Irvin Laszlo says, it's your higher self. You ask the
Right.
question, you shut up.
If you can shut up long enough, you might get the answer. Yeah. On the other side, it is something else speaking through me, right? Like, and I don't mean that in sort of such a woo woo way, but like I feel like there is one of the reasons why I always love some of these stories and they resonate with me more. Like the Akashic records is something that
Hmm.
sticks with me more profoundly than other things. And why is that? Because metaphorically, visually, we can look at the construct of this Akashic records. And like, let's say you just view that as like this layer of knowledge that sits like a rain cloud over us all. And some people can grow their arm long enough to just reach up and grab something and
Sure.
pull it down, right? Some people can't. Some people don't even see that as a cloud. And I feel like that's what I mean with speaking through me when I say, you know what? I think there's parts of me that is able to reach up and grab that stuff when I need it. It has to be intentional. It has to be honest, meaning like I have to be looking for an answer in a way that's meaningful, right? I can't just be
And you
like,
have to suspend whatever beliefs you have.
and you have to be completely void of
Yeah.
assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Herein
really,
is the
really hard.
dissolution with the recursive function. What you just shared is a perfect example of what the Vedas said, right?
Mm.
We're divine threads incarnate, connected to source, higher self, whatever you want to
And
call
connected to source is a very
it,
common word, phrasing.
capable of God consciousness. So what's that mean? It means that that divine thread has infinite intelligence available to you specifically when you ask questions.
Sure. And there's a mortal way of doing that, which I do with clients sometime.
Hmm.
Um, the 7 question game, right? You could ask the same question 7 times, and the first couple
And you
are
go
easy,
deeper and deeper and deeper.
and you just
Yeah.
keep going deeper and deeper. And
Yeah.
everybody, without exception, that I've ever brought into this exercise, 100% of the people get to like layer 3 or 4, and they just basically hit a wall. I mean, I'll get them through. I'll push them as deep as like 5 or 6, but I don't know. I can't. The only a few
Well,
people
not
that I
only
can.
do they hit a wall, they get angry,
Well, they get
right?
confronted.
You feel confronted.
Yeah,
And so that, they're like, well,
yeah, their fight
that's
or
that.
flight kicks in. Yeah, like
Yeah.
they start getting real edgy, right? Because like you could just say like, like, and it's funny because you could do it with something completely benign, right? You could just be like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm a web designer. Okay, why? So there, now we're on question 2. It's like, well, I don't know. I like technology and, like blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right, question 3. Well,
Why?
what makes you like technology? And like now it starts to get harder. Even at question 3, you're like, huh? Wait, hold on a second. Wait, I've never asked that question before. No one ever told me I had to know these layers. And then you start to this person paying attention. By question 3 or 4, you should immediately recognize all of the holes in your assumptions, all of the things that you have not unpacked, all of the
Mhm.
problems with the way you're thinking, all of the issues with your metacognition, soup to nuts. should start to become immediately obvious right around
Now,
then.
here's where so 70,000 thoughts a day, according to the neuroscientists, right?
Okay. Yeah, I've heard
Brainiacs.
that too. I think I'm way over that,
Yeah,
but
depending on, how quiet you
yeah,
can be, right? Um, in those 70,000 thoughts, because of where you just took people, most of those thoughts are going to be self-deprecating because the people is like, I don't know this, I don't know why, and then they start beating up on themselves, right? And we do that incessantly,
sure.
internally, instead of embracing what we don't know, recognizing that we don't know what we don't know, and being okay with that, and then just asking better questions to unpack what we can know.
Yeah, even that exercise, that 7 question exercise, if the proctor doesn't understand how to ask good questions, you could rip through 7 questions that are like at the idiot level and not really dive in there. I
Right,
mean,
right.
but if you really know how to work that equation, like you can get people real deep into thought, almost hypnotic into thought if
Hmm.
you're the person's willing to play ball. And when they come out of that, they're always like, you know what? That's weird. I've never done that before. But like for people who did it, I don't want to say right, but people that like really leaned into the process, they come out of it like almost like cleansed, like a little refresher. It's almost like they took a really
Sure.
long nap. They're like, oh my
Well,
God.
you go into those depths of truth and reality for the individual that they've never explored yet, which brings about greater resonance in their total being.
Sure.
Because you've now just exposed that, you have helped them to expose it to themselves.
Yeah. We had a therapist on the show one time that does a reset protocol. And when he does that, he goes, listen, at the end of this, I just want you to understand the end of this could mean you're getting a divorce. It could mean you're moving to Anchorage. Like he's like, there's a bunch of things that could come out of this because we're gonna open up a can of worms that you have never opened up before.
Hmm.
And and he says that not to be sort of mystical, but he says that to be like candid. Hey, listen, we're gonna go on a journey that you've never been on before. And it might sting. Like I just need you to be prepared. Like, are you ready? To your point, are you ready to die for what you believe in? Well, are you ready to get a divorce for what I'm about to tell you? Are you ready to move because you find out that New Jersey isn't where you should be living? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Right.
and
Well, and it's funny too how when you're willing to let go of everything, and this goes back to, if you should, be willing to give up your life for my sake, you shall have it. I think this is
yeah,
where that enters in, right? That ability to just let go and not be attached to anything. And this is where we recognize all the fetters of the ego and all the different, psychic cords that we have to what we believe our lives should be like.
right, right, sure. But you know what's funny? This is where I'm that 50-yard line kid again, right?
Uh-huh.
I say to myself, I'm like, you know what? I love that. I do. I'd love to just like reset the playing board, go back to zero, unattached from everything. But I said, but you know what? We just talked about this. You know who had a good idea? Maslow. His his hierarchy tells us that like we need shelter, we need food, we need water, right? Well, if I have a house and a bank account with some money in it so that I'm not, like
Hmm.
freaking out all the time and a 401k and there's food in the cabinet and I can go to the grocery store in my car because I have a car. Like I don't necessarily think I should or have to give up all of these things just to sort of reconnect. Like these are the
No,
things, in fact, that let me the allow me the luxury of exploring these things.
right. And that's where we are as a human race right now. We have all of those accoutrements that allow us to experience, at least in the West, not
Sure.
so
No,
much in
no.
the East or Africa or,
Yeah, it's certainly not a
Far
universal
East,
thing.
but
Yeah.
it's not a ubiquitous thing yet.
Well,
Um,
the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
It's like,
Um, it does give us the ability to see more because we aren't so um, trying to, we feel safe and secure, right? To some
sure.
degree. So all of those things have been taken care of, and we can self-actualize or self-realize, depending, or both simultaneously, as the case may be. And in that sense, it's almost like we flip Maslow's hierarchy. And once we have those things, it's like, the inverted pyramid, as above, so below,
Right.
right? So when we start from that place of seeking self-actualization, now because we can afford to do so,
Yeah.
then it takes off in a different direction. And oftentimes, from my perspective, those who have ascended to that level become servant leaders in some way, shape, or form.
And I think a lot of those near death people end up in sort of those positions a lot where they're like, look, I'm here to sort of really lean into my purpose. And that's
Hmm.
going to mean leading in some capacity. And I think that is a common observation of that
And if
group.
we
And
could just all get along, right?
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it really does come down to that, right? Like, I'm not an adversarial people. I have a funny sticker on my laptop. It's like, I'm a little bit of peace and love with or I'm a lot of peace and love with a little bit of go fuck yourself, right? Like, and
Right,
I feel
right.
like, and I feel like I don't like to be confrontational, and I don't like to really be angry. And if I could have this kind of conversation every day, but I'm also like, hey, look, if you're not willing to just be able to suspend whatever is causing this aggression from your side, then I don't know what to tell you. We can't have a civil conversation because like you're not willing to, right? And I will never be the one that leads that, but I'm certainly the one to lead the exit if I have to. You know what I mean? Because at
Sure,
this point, I'm like, yeah, listen, I don't ask much from you, but I just want you to not be a dick so that we could have a conversation. We don't have to agree, like we don't have to agree at all, right? But we do have to be curious, right? Like Ted Lasso, that line, be curious, not judgmental. One of the best lines in TV history, I think, right?
yeah,
And the story he's telling as he's doing it is even better. It's like just one of those scenes of TV history that just it's all the good things TV could be is that scene, right?
sure.
And it's like I should want to tattoo that on my forehead, right? Like if we were all just curious instead of judgmental, like none of these problems would exist, right? We would all want to
That's
hear
the
the
ultimate
story.
advice,
Yeah,
right?
we
I didn't
want to
even
hear the
have to ask
story.
the
What does my aura
question.
look like? You tell me. Like,
Right,
so
right,
anyway,
right. Fascinating and so worthwhile to explore.
yeah, cool. Well, it's a fun conversation. It's hard
Absolutely.
to,
And hopefully it'll be um, shared profusely.
yeah, love it.
We get to that place. Matt, this has been absolutely awesome. I appreciate your time and your
Likewise.
openness, your own transparency and the willingness to look at yourself and others and just kind of say, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's what I think, from
Yeah.
my experience, which is really our experience is what gives us this notion of truth.
Yeah. It's all we got in the end, right? I mean,
Yeah,
we don't know which is the right orange. It's just what I call orange. That's it.
yeah. But we do know that we're here, that we desire to be who we are in a loving way and to have that reciprocated by those around us and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It's the achievement of that we're trying to figure out how to bridge those inner and outer worlds.
Yeah. And I'll stop thinking about this, I guess, when they lay me in the ground. And then even then, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I
Yeah.
doubt that you'll
Possibly.
stop thinking about it because,
Yeah.
as I found out, we just because we're dead doesn't mean we can't think.
Yeah.
We're
It's
just in
funny.
a different
Yeah. We're
realm.
just in a different place. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, exactly. Matt,
Cool.
again, I surely appreciate your time and it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Great having you, or great having me. Thank you so much. Looking forward to our
Yeah,
next conversation.
it's been great having me too, as
Yeah.
I am another you, right? And you are another me. So I thank you again. And to our audience, again, please like, subscribe, share, make comments. It's what helps us all. If you enjoyed this conversation, let us know. And by all means, stop by planetarycitizens.net and pick up Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart of Humanity. It states a lot of these things very simply so that we can all have a global view of the progress that we're making as humanity together. So thank you very much and namaste and in lock catch. I'll see you next time.